Good afternoon. Welcome to the Baton Rouge Press Club. Pretty confident everybody knows our speaker today, so I'm going to keep the intro remarks fairly short, even though Michelle sent along a very nice long list of accomplishments. John Kennedy was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2016. He serves on the Appropriations, Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs, Budget, Judiciary, and Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committees in the Senate. And he serves as the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government. Prior to his election to the Senate, Mr. Kennedy was state treasurer of Louisiana for 5 terms. Before that, he worked as secretary of the Department of Revenue, special counsel to Governor Buddy Roemer, and secretary of Governor Roemer's cabinet. He graduated, there's a whole bunch of accomplishments just from college and law school and everything else, so I'll tell you some basics. He graduated from Vanderbilt, where he was president of his senior class. He received his law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law, where he was an executive editor of the Law Review. He earned a Bachelor of Civil Law degree with first-class honors from Oxford in England. And he worked as an adjunct professor at LSU's Paul M. Hebert Law Center from 2002 to 2016, and he still often volunteers as a substitute teacher for public schools. We are very excited to have him here. And one reminder, if you want to ask questions, you can be a member of the press club or a member of the working media. And I was asked to tell everyone that next week we'll have the police chief here as our guest on Monday. So without further ado, Senator Kennedy.
Good afternoon. What I thought I would do today is spend a few minutes telling you where we have been in the United States Congress, where we are, and hopefully where we're going. I'm going to start with the year 2016. That was the beginning of the 115th Congress. As you know, Congress is run in 2-year cycles. We're now about 6 months into the 116th Congress, so I'm really talking about what we have done in the last 2.5 years. I started in 2016 because that was the beginning of my tenure in Washington. Anyway, more to the point, it was the beginning of President Trump's tenure. If you forget about the politics for a moment and forget about the personalities and just concentrate on the facts, I think you'd have to conclude that the last 2.5 years have been very eventful. Now, you may agree or disagree with those events, but I don't think any fair-minded person could deny that Congress and this administration have done quite a lot. We have cut taxes. We have increased wages. I'm very proud of the fact that wages are going up between 3 and 4% on an annualized basis. Those who are in the lower percentile in terms of income are seeing wage increases, income increases that are higher than those in the upper levels, and I'm very proud of that. We have helped the private sector, as a result, create about 6 million new jobs. We have delivered 3 to 4% GDP growth, depending upon whose numbers you agree with. That's average for America. If you start with the year 2008, the beginning of the Great Recession, and go back 30 years, average GDP growth in America is about 3.1%. So between 3 and 4% is normal. Now, of course, we went into a recession in 2008. During the 8 years of the prior administration's term, President Obama's term, when when we broke 1 to 1.5% GDP growth, which many economists said was the new normal, everybody moved to have a toga party. We thought it was just a wonderful thing. I never did, and I think most people who have a sense of history never did. 3% growth was normal for our country, and we're back to what's normal. We have about a 3.6% unemployment rate. We have the lowest unemployment rate by the way, that's the lowest unemployment in America has been since Woodstock, since 1969. We have the lowest unemployment rate in history for African Americans. We have the lowest unemployment rate in history for Hispanics. We have at this moment about $7.4 million, or 7.4 million more jobs available than we do have job seekers, which is a nice problem to have. Perhaps most important of all, we have seen an increase in worker productivity. That, as much as anything, is driving the increase in wages. Normal productivity growth for America averages about 2%. For the longest time, at least up until 2016, we were only seeing increases of about 1%. That's part of the reason that you didn't see much wage growth, along with the fact that a lot of businesses had to take their profits, and instead of giving their workers salary increases, were spending the money on benefits such as health insurance, which, as we all know, has been going up. We've also deregulated the economy. That's as important to get growth started again as anything we have done. Americans spend about 1.9 trillion, not billion, trillion, 12 zeros, dollars a year complying with federal government rules and regulations. That's more than the amount of personal and corporate income tax collections. Enormously expensive. I'm not saying that all of those regulations are unnecessary. I am saying that many of them are. We have 185,000 pages of rules and regulations. It would take you 3 years to read them one time. You could stack them up, stand on them, and paint the ceiling. This administration, with the help of the United States Congress using the Congressional Review Act, has started rolling back rules and regulations. As you know, the Trump administration has a one-in, two-out policy. If an agency wants to promulgate a new regulation, it has to point to two regulations that it's going to get rid of. And I think it has had a dramatically positive impact on the American economy. There is a great debate going on primarily in front of the third branch of government, the United States Supreme Court, about the role of the bureaucracy in our Constitution. Right now, in an average year, the federal agencies will promulgate about 30 rules to every single law passed by Congress. And I think most reasonable people would look at the bureaucracy we've created with about 2.2 million non-defense employees and say, what has Congress wrought here? I mean, the bureaucracy in Washington, I don't use that in a pejorative sense, I'm trying to use it in a neutral sense, really has become a giant rogue beast. It really has become a fourth branch of government. You have bureaucrats who write their own laws, they promulgate their own rules, they interpret their own rules, and they prosecute those rules in front of the judges that they appoint. There's also a Supreme Court precedent that basically says, it's called the Chevron doctrine, that our federal courts are supposed to defer in almost all cases, that's a bit of an overstatement, but not much, to the agency interpretation. Supreme Court as we think it right. But whether you agree with that approach or you disagree, it's enormously expensive. The costs of compliance are generally passed on to consumers. The average consumer in America today pays about $15,000 more as a result of those rules and regulations. We've also improved veterans' health care. I'm very proud of that. We're not there yet, but eventually we want to reach a place where if you are a veteran and you can't get the health care you want from the Veterans Administration, we know the problems we've had there, that you can go to any doctor or hospital you want to, and we'll pay the tab. We've eliminated the Affordable Care Act mandate. Some see that as a negative, some see that as a positive. But the fact is, we've done it. We've opened up drilling in ANWR. This has not been commented on much, but it was a huge step in terms of this country's energy independence. I know a lot of the focus in our country today is on shale technology, and that's certainly important. Has been important to us becoming energy independent. But the problem with shale oils is that you got to keep drilling. They deplete very quickly. ANWR is a different story. I never thought we would. We folded it into our tax cut deal. I never thought in my lifetime I would see ANWR open to drilling. Many of my friends in the environmental community opposed it. I supported it for a variety of reasons. I'm comfortable with the environmental concerns, and here's why. If you imagine a football field and take a postage stamp and put it in the middle of the field on the 50-yard line. Football field with a postage stamp in the middle on the 50-yard line. That postage stamp represents the amount of land on which oil and gas companies will drill in Angola. We have beaten back ISIS. 2 years ago, ISIS had a caliphate, its own country in the Middle East. We haven't defeated them completely. You never completely defeat terrorism in this world, but we have beaten them back. I think that's a major accomplishment. We've strengthened our defense. If you look at defense spending as a percentage of gross domestic product, going back 10 to 15 years, the line on the graph looks like this. We've now stabilized defense spending, and it has gradually started upward. We're in the middle of debating our defense bill right now, trying to work things out in Congress. For the first time in a long time, America is also standing up to its enemies. We all have our opinions about this. I'll give you mine. I don't know why this is. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. But there are people in this world. They're not sick. They're not confused. They're not mixed up. It's not a question that their mama or daddy didn't love them enough. They're just evil. They're just evil. And some of them run countries. And many of them are our enemies. And for the longest time, these countries, like Russia, like China, like North Korea, like Iran, were making the rules. They're not making the rules anymore. They do not love Americans anymore, but they respect us. And I'm very proud of the fact that this country, for the first time in a long time, is standing up to people. It's standing up to President Xi. It's standing up to the Ayatollah. And standing up to Kim Jong-un. And finally, we have confirmed right around 130 new federal judges, including but not limited to new Supreme Court justices. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. I can tell you what I look for in a federal judge. I don't really care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Obviously, the White House sends over nominations, and they do. But I'm looking for a man or woman who is smart, who understands the law, who has experience, who is a respected attorney in his or her community, and who understands the role of the judiciary in our Madisonian system of separation of powers. That role, in my opinion, is judges are supposed to tell us what the law is, not what the law ought to be. Judges are not supposed to be super legislators. The law is not supposed to be politics practiced a different way. And I really regret that our United States Supreme Court, among people's perceptions, I'm not sure that it reflects reality, but among people's perceptions, has become so politicized. If I could just speak personally for a moment, I sit on 5 committees. I sit on appropriations, judiciary, banking, budget, and small business. On the appropriations committee, when we do an appropriations bill, the federal budget is so big, we don't just do one bill. We bust it up into 12 different bills. And we have an appropriations chairman, Richard Shelby from Alabama. And then we have 12 other chairmen, subcommittee chairmen, or chairwomen, I guess you could say, who are in charge of 1/12 of the budget. I'm one of those subcommittee chairmen. My budget, I'm in charge of the budget for financial services and general government. And I have jurisdiction over the White House, Treasury Department, IRS, FTC, FCC, among others. We're in the process of putting together a budget. And of course, I'm a member of the full Appropriations Committee. Michelle gave you a handout. We have managed in the last, I think this is what this reflects, Michelle, in the last 2.5 years to appropriate about $2.62 billion for Louisiana. I'm not saying that's all my doing. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Cassidy and I work closely together. Well, the entire delegation works closely together, and as a member of the Appropriations Committee, we meet often, and my colleagues kind of filter their requests through to me. But it does help to have someone from your state as a member of the Appropriations Committee. During my first 2 years in Congress, 115th Congress, I managed to pass 5 bills. The press just gives me credit for 4, but I contend it's 5. I would be glad to explain them to you to the extent you're interested. Myself and, I don't want to forget to give him credit, Pennsylvania Republican, our Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, who are leading Republicans in the Senate and the House, respectively, from the freshman class in terms of bill passing. I hesitate to do this, so I feel a little uncomfortable doing it, but my 4 bills, 5, depending on how you look at it, in his first 2 years, Senator Cassidy passed 1, Vitter 1, Landrieu 0, Rowe 2, Johnson 2. So I'm pretty proud of the hard work that we were able to do. I had some advantages because we had a Republican Senate and a Republican House and a Republican President. But I can tell you, it's hard to get a bill passed in Congress. It's frustrating sometimes. You want to gavel, but you have to inch them off. Particularly the Senate. The House is run by the Speaker. What she says goes. But the Senate's completely different. The Senate is 100 different independent contractors. But under our rules, any single senator can shut the whole thing down at one time. So the Senate is much more like a crock pot than a microwave. And sometimes I wonder whether the crock pot's even plugged in. I'm going to skip the part about, well, I'll give you a quick idea and then I won't talk about health care. There were some obvious omissions from my list of accomplishments for this, the 115th and the 116th Congress. Health care. We need to do better in terms of health care. I'm going to come back to that. Immigration is still a huge problem. In my judgment, the problem is our asylum laws. Under the way our asylum laws have been written and interpreted, All you have to do is make it across the border of the Rio Grande with Mexico, and step foot on American soil, say the magic words, and you're free to come into our country. Your only obligation is to show up in court. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years later. We have about 11 million people in our country who are here illegally. But we also have about 5,000 people a day. Most of them families, many of them children, who are coming in primarily from the northern triangle countries into Central America. We do have a huge crisis at the border. We could fix it in 3 weeks if we would change the asylum laws, but I don't, frankly, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see my Democratic friends voting for that. I think it may be possible to reach the middle ground. We're working on the bill right now in the Judiciary Committee with my Democratic colleagues on the Senate side, which if they come around will probably pass the House. And a number of them do see the need to reform our asylum laws, but a number of them just don't. They don't put it this way, but in Washington you have to watch what people do, not what they say. A number of my Democratic colleagues, and this is America, you're entitled to believe what you want, but they believe that illegal immigration is a moral good. They see the border as a nuisance. I don't. We welcome about 1 million people across the world to become American citizens every day, more than any other country, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that so many people want to come to America. When's the last time you heard of somebody trying to sneak into China? And they want to come here. And the folks that we welcome legally, they come, they wait in line patiently, they follow the law, they're properly vetted, and then we welcome them into our country. But we do have another 500. So this is not an anti-immigrant country, we're a nation of it. But we do have about another 500,000. Now it's going to be more. Try to come to our country, and if for no other reason but public safety. You have to have immigration laws. We also need to do work on our federal civil service system. It needs to be overhauled completely. I'm hoping that we'll find common ground to do that. We obviously need to do something on infrastructure. The problem is how to pay for it. And China. I don't want to be enemies with China. I want to be, it's clear to me we will always be competitors. I want to be a friendly competitor. I want to work with China when we can, particularly solving problems like North Korea. I have been to China twice, 3 times. Never met with President Xi. I've met with Premier Li, the #2. And I learned a lot in both meetings. We were primarily talking trade and liquefied natural gas and opioids, because most of the opioids coming into our country from Mexico, the synthetic ones, start in China. But I don't want to be China's enemies. But China has got to play by the rules. They've gotten to be very big and very successful by cheating, by not playing by the rules. You know, God created the world; everything else now is made in China, it seems. We admitted China, and I say we admitted because they wouldn't have gotten in but for our support. We admitted China to the World Trade Organization on December 11, 2001. They started cheating December 12th. And for 10, 15, 20 years, the mantra was always be patient with them as their middle class develops and their per capita income rises, they will become more like us. That's not true. President Xi is there for life, and he does not believe in democracy. He's even moving further and further away from free enterprise with the subsidies they're providing to their state-owned companies. I see the trade war, I don't speak for the president, but the way I see it, I see the trade war with China. It's not really about trade. It's about demanding that China, which is part of the world economy, play by the rules of the political economy. And I'm hoping we can get it worked out. We'll see. In terms of other bills I'm working on, to the extent you're interested, we'll be working on a lot of larger issues, the ones I just mentioned, immigration, China, that sort of thing. I have bills, I'm not saying I'll pass all of them, but I'm sure as hell won't try. I have a bill that I think will pass to provide that non-disclosure agreements and sexual harassment settlements are prohibited if the alleged victim wants to be able to speak. In other words, it will be up to the alleged victim to say whether he or she wants a non-disclosure, a gag rule. I have a bill that would preclude the Internal Revenue Service from hiring a consultant that owes the American people taxes, final judgment. I think I've got a chance on that because the IRS is under my committee jurisdiction. I'm working with the Department of Labor. It's a small business 401k bill. Basically, it would just say if you're a small businesswoman or a small businessman, you can join with other small businesses, like through a Chamber of Commerce, and pool your resources and pool your efforts and set up a 401k. Right now, large corporations can set up a 401k. They've got the resources and the talent and the cash flow, but many small businesswomen, small businessmen can't. But if they could join together, they would get the economy of scale. I have a bill reforming the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. I have a bill called the Case Act setting up small claims court for copyright infringements. I have a bill trying to temporarily waive an antitrust exemption for newspapers so they can negotiate with many of our large social media companies. I have a net neutrality bill, an internet privacy bill, of course, a flood insurance bill, and I have some bills directed to China. Let me conclude by talking just about a little bit about healthcare. I wish that we could do something. And I think we can, but I'm afraid it's going to be difficult around the edges. Now is the time for us to take a hard look at the Affordable Care Act. I didn't want to see the Affordable Care Act fail. We were told if we passed the Affordable Care Act, we'd have two things. We'd have cheaper health insurance, and it'd be more accessible. It's been needed. I don't ascribe that to bad mothers. You'll never. I wish what President Obama had tried had worked. It wasn't a question of bad mothers. In hindsight, it was just a bad idea. Doctors with the best of intentions 150 years ago used to bleed their patients. They didn't have a bad motive. They thought it would help them. They stopped it because it was killing them. We failed to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with something better. I think it's going to be a while, probably until after the presidential election, because the mantra on the Democratic side of the aisle, at least in the Senate, is Medicare for all. It's really not Medicare for all, it's Medicare for none. It would get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, all private insurance. How many of you have private insurance with your employer? Anybody? I do. Well, you're going to lose it. Forget it. You've got to give it up. It costs about $3 trillion a year. The federal government would basically regulate doctors and hospitals like utilities. And the irony is that the Affordable Care Act failed, and the answer of my Democratic friends is more government. The government fails, the answer is more government. If you like the idea of the federal government running the healthcare delivery system in America, imagine living in a world designed exclusively by the post office. It's kind of what you're going to get. It won't pass the Senate. I don't think it passed the House. But until the election's over, we're not going to be able to get that off the table. We are going to be able to nibble around the edges. I've introduced 4 bills. I'll go through them quickly. The Medical Billing Fairness Act, no surprise billing. If you go to the emergency room with your health insurance, and it's in the emergency room's in your provider, and they bring in somebody who's not in network, you shouldn't get a bill with a state. I also have a bill that's going to crack down on pharmacy benefit managers, require PBMs to pass their discounts and rebates on the consumers and employers. I have legislation that would prevent patent thickets, prevent product hopping, that's over patenting and tweaking a patent to extend it. I'm not the only one that has these bills. Just about every member of the Senate does. So what we're going to do after the break, hopefully before August, but I'll see, we're going to take everybody's bills and mold them into one. And we will negotiate with Democrats and Republicans and see if we can't come up with a final product. Probably Lamar Alexander, who is the chairman of the, what we call the Health Committee. The Health Committee, the acronym is HELP, will probably be in charge. So far, I think it will have things like no surprise medical bills. If somebody's outside of your network, if you don't know them, you don't have to pay their bill. You have to pay the average bill in the community. It will eliminate the rebates and discounts from PBMs in the sense that the PBMs could put the discounts and the rebates in their pocket. They have to pass them on to the consumer. I think our bill, I think we have support on both sides of the aisle. The bad gag clauses that prevent patients and employers from knowing the cost. We're going to try to require patients to give a summary of the services and the cost when they leave the hospital, not the long, difficult to understand printout that you get now. We're going to stop drug companies from not providing samples of their drug to generic drug companies. For a generic drug company to develop a generic, it has to have like 5,000 of the brand name pills, and a lot of the brand name pill companies don't like to share. And I think it's also going to raise the smoking age to the age to purchase tobacco to 21. I didn't mean to talk that long. That's at the end. I'm glad to answer questions.
Your office released a statement today, Senator, about recovery for the Stanford victims from a Swiss bank, and you and Senator Cassidy also sent a letter to the SEC.
Right.
So can you talk about that a little bit? And how realistic do you think it really is that people will start to see their money?
Well, the problem we've had with Stanford, Jay Clayton is the chairman of the SEC, and I've gotten to know Jay pretty well, in part because I have jurisdiction over his budget. But apart from that, he's a very capable guy, and I'm very impressed with him. He wants to help us, but his hands are tied. In terms of jurisdiction of the SEC. What Bill and I announced today, I think it was today, is that I believe we have convinced the government of Switzerland to force Sogin, which is a large Swiss bank, to turn, what is it, Michelle, $100 million? It's about $100 million over to the Stanford receivership. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is I don't know yet what cut the Stanford receiver is going to take. The Stanford receiver, I forget the numbers, but they have collected a lot of money. They've also paid themselves a lot of money. I'm not terribly pleased about that. I think everybody ought to be paid for their work, but their fees have been excessive. But it's we're not there yet. We don't have our hands on the money. But I frankly didn't think we were going to be able to get the Swiss government to come around. But I think Sogin is going to obey. I'm very pleased with that. Something we work on every day. Yeah,
on the subject of health care, obviously, as you point out, Congress has done nothing so far to repeal and replace.
Right.
Do you think the federal lawsuit that was filed in Texas and is now in the New Orleans Appeals Court is the appropriate approach to try and get rid of the Affordable Care Act, since it does not seem that Congress has been inclined to find a way to deal with the replacement?
Well, there are a number of lawsuits working their way through the courts. What will count will be if the United States Supreme Court takes those suits and gives us a definitive ruling. I don't care to predict whether it will or it won't. I don't have any way of knowing. But if it does, it will still be a long time. In the meantime, the cost of health insurance in America continues to go up. I regret that that the Senate, I can't comment on the House. The House is completely up to the Speaker and the Shadow Speaker. Normally, the Speaker of the House of Representatives runs these shows. And in this case, it's Congresswoman Pelosi, as you know. But the dynamics of the House are such that she now has a sort of a shadow speaker, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, because Mrs. Pelosi has to go to Ms. Ocasio-Cortez to make sure she can line up the votes in those cases. So I can't comment about what they're doing. I think they're for Medicare for all, or at least Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. That dog will not hunt in the Senate. It'll never pass in the Senate. Everybody knows that. I wish we could get it off the table and really sit down and try to seriously negotiate something, but I don't see it happening until elections are. That's why we have this legislation that I think will help some, but it's not, it's not going to completely solve the problem. But in terms of the cost of prescription drugs, I think it will help. I think it'll help substantially. And there are other things that we can do together in the Senate. Whether they'll be able to pass the House or not, though, I don't know. Yes, sir.
When pollster John Couvion was down a few weeks ago, he responded to a question about what he thought the Trump factor would be in the upcoming governor's race, and saying he believed basically that President Trump would be pretty passive and not get actively involved. Can you provide any insight as to what you believe may be the case? And also, after the runoff, would you care to elaborate as to whether you two may have some involvement in the governor's race after it's gotten down past the October 12th primary?
Well, I have talked with President Trump about politics, okay, about Louisiana governor's race. I don't care to divulge the details of it. I don't think that would be fair to him or to me, and it's a private conversation. I think the race is wide open. It's just my personal opinion. I don't think we're going to have a feel for things until the race really starts, and it hasn't really started yet. And it'll start when people go up on television, how the amount of resources they have, how they spend those resources, what the people of Louisiana think about the candidates. And then, you know, will the president get involved? I'm going to let the president speak for himself on that. All I can tell you is he might. But the president kind of does things his way. He plays outside the pocket, and he'll make his own decision in that regard. He'll probably talk to a number of us before he does, but he'll make that decision himself. I think it's going to be a very close race, and I think it's wide open. I think Governor Edwards has an advantage, and he seems to have plenty of money. He's going to have many members of the mainstream media with him. There are people, we all know who they are, that if you read the media, that if you turn John Bell upside down and shook him, members of the media fall out of his pocket. We all know that's true. On the other hand, the state has been trending Republican. Whether Eddie, I know John Bell and Eddie and Ralph, all three of them, I like all three of them. But campaigns are about, you've got to have the resources, you've got to do everything right, your timing's got to be good, and you've got to have a little luck. So we'll see.
If I may follow up on that, you suggested that you may be involved with the Attorney General on legislative races, and that's a big election issue.
Right.
Could you address that?
Yep, I will be involved in legislative races where people ask me to get involved. I'm also involved in an effort. We had a meeting the other night. I had to participate by phone. The Louisiana majority, Louisiana, I forget the LCC We're interviewing candidates now. I think I'm going to endorse a candidate tonight. What we doing, Ross? Turkey Creek. We haven't. Yeah, I'm going to be making an endorsement tonight. And I do plan on being very involved to the extent that the candidates want me to. I've been raising money for the effort. And I think it's very important. We've got two groups of folks in Louisiana state government now, and I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. We've got those who believe in more freedom and those who believe in more free stuff. And I think we're at the juncture. We're at the same juncture at the federal level as well.
Senator,
Yeah, Jim.
you were counsel to Governor Romer when he proposed to anti-abortion bills.
Right.
Governor Edwards just signed a bill that was even more stringent than the bills Governor Romer vetoed. What's your assessment of what Governor Edwards did?
Oh, I think he did the right thing. Sure, the question was the abortion bill that passed the recent Louisiana legislature. Governor Edwards signed it. Was that the right thing or the wrong thing to do? In my judgment, it was the right thing. Now, this issue will eventually probably come to a head at the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, you can generally tell whether the United States Supreme Court has gotten an issue right or decision right by judging or assessing the extent to which the American people accept it. For example, Brown v. Board of Education. That was the right thing for the U.S. Supreme Court to do morally, and the American people have embraced it. Roe v. Wade is all Americans have embraced it. Regardless of what you think about the result, I think most people who have studied the Constitution and who, I've said this before, know a lot of book from the J. Crew catalog, know it's one of the most poorly reasoned opinions the U.S. Supreme Court has ever handed down. It's based all on viability. The U.S. Supreme Court has tried to clean it up in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and helped a little bit with the new test, undue burden, but even that is not proven satisfactory. I happen to think that abortion is one of those issues that is properly left in the hands of the legislative body. In this case, the Congress or at the state level, the legislature. My copy of the Constitution doesn't mention the word abortion. For that matter, it doesn't even mention the word privacy. I'm not saying I'm not glad we don't have a right to privacy, but a textualist would say the founders didn't think about abortion. And when you, on issues like that, you want, in my opinion, you want them decided by a legislative body which is accountable to the voting public as opposed to some men and women who are going for life. Will the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately take a Roe v. Wade type case? I don't know. But I do know the country is split. And the issue is going to come down to what I think for most people is the obvious. Is a fetus a human being or not?
It sounds as though you may have evolved on this issue yourself.
Oh, yes. We've talked about that.
In what way?
Well, when you have children, when you have an adopted son, it changes your perspective on the world. To me, it comes down to this. You either believe that the fetus is a human being or you don't. I believe that the fetus is a human being. For me, all life is sacred. And our respect for life, our view that life is sacred, separates America from a lot of other countries. Now, if you don't think that a fetus is a human being, story. It's only going to be too metaphysical, but that's what it comes down to. That and your world. And whether the Supreme Court will take it up or not, I don't know. I mean, I read, look, I sat through a lot of hearings with both Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. No fair-minded person can think they're not intelligent, very intelligent. They don't have a judicial philosophy that they thought about. They're not qualified to be on the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh went through a lot. Some of my colleagues tried to convince me that, a sexual harassment allegation, you're morally tainted if you don't automatically believe the accuser. I don't agree with that. I think you're morally tainted if you don't give both the accuser and the accused respect. That means encouraging people who think they're victims of harassment to come forward, treat them with respect. Give both the accuser and the accused respect and due process. In America, just because you're accused of something doesn't mean you're guilty. And that's my standard of what's more.
Could you vote for a judge who's in favor of Roe v. Wade?
I don't know. It was just probably not. But if I knew that that was going to be his position or her position. But I don't believe, and I've tried to follow this in terms of my work in the judiciary, under the canons of ethics, you're not supposed to, and indeed I never have and never will, ask a candidate how he would rule, or nominee how he would rule on a particular case. If you're asking me if I believe in Roe v. Wade, the answer is no. I don't believe in the result, and I don't believe in the reason. And I hope that the United States Supreme Court overrules it. But I've never been convinced it belongs in front of the United States Supreme Court anyway. I've always believed it was more of a decision for a legislative body. Now, and I'm not going to vote for a judge that I think is going to has automatically predetermined his position to uphold Roe v. Wade. But I'm also not going to ask a nominee in the Judiciary Committee, because I think it's improper. Because judges or courtrooms are not legislative halls. I'm not going to ask a judge how he would rule on a specific case. That's improper.
If the Affordable Care Act was struck down, would you support continued federal subsidies for individual policies and the Medicaid expansion? And do you think those things would be politically viable?
I would like to take our Medicaid program and our food stamp program and our welfare programs, TANF. We have about 170 social programs at the federal level. If you add in the state and local money, we spend about $1 trillion a year helping our neighbors who are less fortunate than us. I would take as much of that money as I could block grant to the states with as few restrictions as possible to allow the states, they know their needs better than Washington does, to allow the states to innovate. Maybe a state would like to spend more money on health care. Maybe a state would benefit, let's say, food stamps. Maybe a state would like to spend some money on child care. The states are the laboratories of democracy. If I could, if I were king for a day and I would inspire people, I'd block grant that money. I also think there should be a work requirement. I think if you're between the ages, I would start small. I have a bill to implement a Medicaid work requirement. I think if you're between the ages of 18 and let's say 60, I'll speak in circle 55, and you're able-bodied and you don't have children, you should be required to work 20 hours a week to access any of the social programs, or go back to school 20 hours a week, or do community service. And there are a lot of states that have set up programs that we could copy in those would help people get the jobs. I mean,
What I'm getting at is-
Governor Edwards has a work requirement, he just doesn't quite work. It's a work requirement without work. And you know what we've been through in terms of Medicaid. I think our Department of Health is $400 million of taxpayer money that is still in the dirt because they didn't bother to check with people, tell them about their income verification. I have a bill in Congress that would require all social programs implemented by states and the federal government to review IRS data.
Well, we have, what I'm trying to get at is we have a specific bill, now a law in Louisiana, that purports to have Louisiana ACA replacement that anticipates.
Well, I saw that.
And it anticipates that those funds for subsidies and
Well,
Medicaid
what my understanding of the law, and it's a good start, but my understanding of the law is that it would set up a high-risk pool in Louisiana. Now, high-risk pool can work depending on how you structure it and how much you subsidize it. I don't think the Affordable Care Act goes to be solved in the state level. I think it's going to require congressional action.
I think we have time for one more.
Senator, what do you think about Louisiana prisons holding some of the illegal aliens in the situation? We've been doing it a long time, haven't we? I remember the Oak Grove long ago. What do you think about that?
Here's what I think. Yeah, I think illegal immigration is illegal. Duh. Now, if you don't believe it, this is America. You're entitled to believe what you want. If you believe in open borders, you ought to say it. If you believe that illegal immigration is a moral good, as some of my colleagues do, then you ought to say it. I believe in the rule of law. I think that we ought to enforce our laws. And Trump's only sin is that he's doing what a bipartisan group of politicians in Washington, D.C. have always refused to do. He's enforcing the law.
Do you think we have a responsibility to make sure that there are humane conditions, except, you know, this, if it's in a for-profit
Yeah,
situation?
I do. And we just passed a $4.5 billion bill to try to improve the conditions on the border. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said they were all camp concentration camps. I don't mean any disrespect, but the Congresswoman's more famous than she is black. She needs to go to the Holocaust Museum and take a look at what a real concentration camp is like. The problem we're having at the border with our facilities is they're overcrowded. There are 5,000 people a day. Here's what happens. These folks, many of them are good people. Some of them aren't. Some of them are child pornographers and criminals and gang members, but many of them are good people. Their conditions are so bad in El Salvador, for example, because their government is so corrupt. They're moving into Mexico. President Lopez Obrador lets them come in. They get to the northern part of Mexico. It's controlled by all the cartels. You have to pay a toll. I don't know what the going rate is. But if you don't pay the Mexican cartels, the criminals, their money to step foot in the Rio Grande, they kill you. But if you pay them their money, they let you cross over under the asylum laws. You touch foot on American soil. You say the magic words under our asylum laws. And we've got so many people coming in that we can't detain people very long. And so they are let free into the country. And what makes it doubly difficult is that most of the people coming in now are families and or unaccompanied minors, or their families with children. In some cases, they're real children. In other cases, children that they've been renting to in the United States. And I think our border people have done the very best that they can. But they're running out of money, and that's why we gave them some more money. I'm going to hush in a minute. We had to fight the House because the House wanted to make sure not a single penny of the $4.5 billion could go to enforcement. because they believe in open borders, at least a big segment of them. Now, Pelosi, to her credit, in part because she couldn't pass it otherwise, and in part because I think she's getting tired of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, went against Ocasio-Cortez, depended on Republican votes, to pass what we passed in the Senate, the $4.5 billion bill. And I thank Speaker Pelosi for that. She got it right once and for all. Proud of her. Thanks, guys.